And now, I have a problem straight away, because the friend who introduced me calls me a sumo commentator, and I was just introduced to as one, I think. It's perfectly true, but I do a lot of other things as well. But there's a saying in Japanese, tage ga muge, in English, jack of all trades, master of none. What advice can I give to people who want to learn about sumo, like I started learning 40 years ago? Go early in the day. Watch the beginners. Teenage goji, teenage yobidashi, teenage wrestlers. There are hardly any other people watching, so you can see everything clearly. And try to find someone who can answer your questions. When I started watching, I was teaching English in the afternoons and evenings, but the mornings were free. So that's why I started this very good habit of going in the mornings. I couldn't go very often in the late afternoon when the big stars came on. And another important thing, when you are a beginner and trying to learn from the bottom, don't try to get to know immediately the big stars. They know thousands of people and they don't really want another one. Everyone wants to meet them. Find a younger wrestler that you like. He'll probably be very pleased if you talk to him and get to know him and shout his name, because when they get up on the dohyo and hear one person shouting their name, they're going to want to like that person. But I'd really like to talk about more things, more basic things, not particularly sumo. I'll come back to it later. But how we are influenced into what we do and what we think. At the end, I'd also like to think about how new things happen. I want you to ask yourselves, do I see things as they really are? Or have my own attitudes been formed by somebody else, especially by the people who were around me when I was younger? And one reason I don't have a PowerPoint presentation with nice photos is that I can't see inside your minds. And I want you to look at your own pictures. What should you have been? What could you have been? What will you be in the future? And music, for instance, my mother was really worried when she found out what I was listening to on Saturday mornings when she was out at work. It was on the radio. There was only radio at that time when I was really young. Our kind of people like dance music and the love songs on the radio, she said. Not Beethoven and Mozart. People of our kind won't like you. They'll think you're a snob if you go around. It's not our kind of people. But Mum, I said, I can do all the other kinds of music too. You know I can sing all the pop songs and all the ones that you liked when you were a girl. But there's so much more music around. And that was when I was 8 or 9 years old. And on the radio there's Mozart, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, Grieg, Albéniz, Delius, Delibes, Smetana. Oh yes, Vltava. Da 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 dum da dum da. Beautiful stuff. The local public library was very important to me, especially when I found out that from age 12 I was allowed to use the grown-ups library if I borrowed my family's green tickets. Grown-ups, for 14 and up, could have two yellow tickets for fiction and 1 green ticket for non-fiction. So every Saturday I used to go and pick out love stories for my grandmother, cowboy stories for my grandfather, detective stories for my mother, and those 3 green tickets I used for myself. I'd worked my way, by the time I was 14, through all the books on stars and planets, myths and legends, pyramids, I loved pyramids, and dinosaurs. Oh, I was mad about dinosaurs, though I don't think I pronounced their names very well. My mother was unusual herself in one way. In those days, nearly everyone left school at 14 and started work. The boys started wearing long trousers instead of shorts, and the girls had their hair permed. Both started smoking cigarettes to show they were grown up. But about 30% went to high school. My mother was rather unusual among people who worked in shops, as she did, because she had gone to high school, but only till she was 15. And she learnt French. That was the big dividing line. She learnt French. She was the only one in my whole neighbourhood who knew French. So at age 11, I also went to high school, and on my first day, I proudly told the French teacher that my mother had learnt French. That had an effect that I didn't find out about for years. That teacher had immediately made a note in my official record that I had wealthy and educated parents. In other words, I didn't know it, but a new chain reaction had started in my life. All the teachers read my record, and they expected me to be top of the class, or at least first three. The funny thing was, as soon as I started learning French myself, I discovered that my mother's French was very bad. Anyway, I wasn't very interested in tennis or hockey, but outside of school, I was crazy about the game of cricket. You don't see much cricket in Japan. I went to the famous Trent Bridge cricket ground every Saturday with my homemade scorecard. And I learnt the names of all the famous cricketers, and of course all the details about them, what they were good at, how many they had scored last time. And that's how I approached sumo too. My interest in sumo was started by an article in a Singapore newspaper, the English language, in 1967. And it was about sumo, a big article, a whole page about sumo, and it mentioned one 13-year-old boy who was so good and so big already that he had already been recruited into a sumo stable and was spending his mornings practicing, training in the stable, and the afternoons he had to go to middle school, Ryogoku Middle School, where he looked like a cuckoo in the nest, so much bigger than everybody else, and sleeping to make up for his early start. So that was the first thing I knew about sumo. The thing about sumo is that it's so simple. The first time you see it, you can understand what's going on, almost always. And yet, when you really start learning about it, there's so much extra. And so many extra things and details. So when I came to live in Japan, 1973. 1974 was the first time I saw sumo. And I took up sumo watching just like I did cricket, taking notes with my own homemade scorecard. Oh, and learning Japanese frantically, because there was no English about sumo. Oh, and the 13-year-old? Oh, yes, he became the grand champion Kitanoumi, and later the head of the Sumo Association. He died quite recently, in his 60s. Yeah. I met him a few times afterwards. A few more recollections from my life in England, if I had. I went to a large mixed school, not the high-class girls' school that is considered better. I went to a mixed school, but musically that was wonderful, because I was in a very big mixed choir, where we had boys who sang tenor and bass, so we had the full range. When I was 11 years old, we sang Borodin's Poloftsian dances. La la dee, dee 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 dee. Oh yes, Born on Wings of Gentle Breezes. What a delight. And another thing, let's get onto the big range. We had an ice rink in Nottingham. And back in the 1980s, something was happening there that was something entirely new. It changed ice dance forever. Now, you see ice dancing now, and you think, oh, well, you know what it's like. It's on the television week after week sometimes. But in those days, it was just ballroom dancers transferred to ice. So they danced a waltz, a quick step, a foxtrot, maybe a rumba, tango, and each time the man with the record had to change the record to the music. And what was happening in the ice rink at Nottingham, outside of ours, was that a young couple called Torvill and Dean and a brilliant instructor were practicing something that had never been done before, telling a story to one piece of music. Ballet dancers had been doing it for centuries, but nobody thought until Torvill and Dean of doing it on ice. And at the Winter Olympics in Sarajevo in 1984, they danced to only one piece of music, Ravel's Bolero, and they acted out a dramatic story. Ravel's Bolero, oh yes. If you're interested in percussion, it has the longest percussion riff in classical music. All of that is one piece. And then, when that had burst out, Torvill and Dean started dancing. And ice dance was never the same again. The judges thought so too. Every judge gave them the maximum score of 6. It was a world record. Nobody had ever got full marks before. Now, of course, they're old-fashioned, but they did something new. And how about the really new things? Yes, artificial intelligence. I mean, books on robots were already famous when I was growing up and going to the library, but artificial intelligence has changed an awful lot. I mean, when they started teaching one particular artificial mind to play chess, people were very snobbish, you know. Chess, so many moves that you can make in chess. They'll never really play good chess. And finally, the artificial intelligence had been taught to learn and to teach itself where it had made mistakes. And it beat a grandmaster. Oh, one set of people were very, very smug about this. They were the people who played Go. And they said, oh, yeah, yes, there are quite a few thousand possible moves in chess, but there are so many moves in Go that it'll be 100 years, if ever, when an artificial intelligence, a robot, can beat a Go master. It happened last week. And did you see it on television? A Korean Go master. He'd lost the third match. There's 2 more. There were 2. He won 1, lost 3, 1 to go. But he's already lost the group of matches. So why don't you examine a few of your own assumptions of what is possible or impossible? Do you still believe what you were told as a child? What you should do? What you shouldn't do? What career you should follow? What career was not good enough for you or was too good for you? Just look inwards, because you're still young. At your age, I was deciding quite a lot of things by myself. I'd only got into Cambridge because although my Latin was very good, I taught myself Greek. The teacher wasn't given time to teach one single person. And I got permission to sit out of one lot of history lessons and teach myself Greek. First the Greek of the Bible, then the Greek of the classics. And I was very bold to apply to only one college. And it was the most famous in England, Girton, the oldest women's college in England. And nobody could believe when they asked me to go for an interview. I took their examination. They asked me to go for an interview. And I can still see myself in the train, looking down on a lighted train, going in the darkness from one place, the old place where my whole life had been, to Cambridge, the new place, where I didn't know it at the time. My next 4 years would be spent. And everything in my life changed from black and white to glorious colour. And I've been living in glorious colour ever since. Thank you.